My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Alma Turechek, who has been a resident of Cedar Rapids for 99 and a half years. Alma, would you tell us what year and where you were born in Cedar Rapids?
I was born October 28, 1901, and I was living in the southwest side of Cedar Rapids, just on 13th Avenue across the street from Riverside Park. My father bought that property just before he was married, and he bought some business property on 16th Avenue, which was just 3 blocks south of that.
What was your folks' name?
My mother's name was Marie. She used to be Marie Novotny, and she married my father, who was Charles Turechek.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had one sister who was 8 years older than I, but she passed away in the flu epidemic of the First World War.
Oh, really? Okay, I would like to touch on that later in our interview. Where did you go to school, Alma?
Well, I went to Van Buren School, which is about 4 blocks away from where I was living. And then I went to Washington High School, graduated there, and then I went on to Coe College, and I graduated there.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a what you would consider a happy childhood, Alma? Did you have fun?
Oh yes, I think I did. My father had bought the house, and the property was a quarter of a block, and we lived across from Riverside Park, and Whitney and all the children used to play cowboys up and down the hills of Riverside Park. Yes, I had a very happy childhood.
How about ice skating? Did you go ice skating?
Well, not when I was young, but when I got into college, we went ice skating, and we'd get on just above the dam, and then we would skate up to High Rock against a wind, and then when we got up there, we'd just open up our coats and let the wind take us downstream. The ice was smooth enough. That was back when the river froze over solid. Oh, yes.
And probably stayed frozen all winter long.
It was very safe then. We wouldn't have gone up if it hadn't been.
How about as a teenager? Did you go to any teenage parties or dances or?
Well, when I got into my advanced teens, I used to go. I'd go some, but I didn't. We were a neighborhood group, and we played in our yard because my father had this large yard there, so that I didn't really think the need to go to parties. And I'm not sure that they had so many parties in those days.
Like they do now.
We made our own fun, I think.
Yes, very much so.
Much of the time.
Mm-hmm. Now the kids will sit around and say, "I'm bored."
Yeah.
Let's do something. I'm bored.
They don't. They have so many things. They have all these electrical games, and the computers and everything to keep them busy. And they have so many activities at school that we didn't used to have.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know you remember the Depression very well. Did that affect your father and his business any, or your lifestyle?
Well, it naturally affected our lifestyle. I don't remember that. Let's see, the Great Impression. What was that?
Depression.
Depression was in
29 to 30.
29.
Right.
Well, my father would have been out of business at that time, so we probably would not have been affected by it. But we were, because I remember we were limited on sugar and meats and fats. I remember we used to get oleo margarine, but it wasn't colored, and they had a little ball of coloration in there in the package with it. We had to stir it up and mix it. I remember that as particularly one thing, but we didn't. We had to conserve on sugar, so we'd save our sugar from one time to another so that we had some sugar for some specific thing.
Did your folks have a big garden?
Oh yes, my mother had a garden in the back of the house, and she had everything. She had a long row of rhubarb, for instance, and that she made a lot with that. But my father was very fond of what he called ground cherries. Do you know what they were?
Yes, I know. I've ate
They
them.
come in a little shell, and he had a part of the garden in that. And my mother used to make just jars and jars of jam out of that. But they also had tomatoes, and they didn't plant very many things like potatoes and so forth. My father bought 3 acres of land up on 28th Avenue and just off of J Street, and he called it his farm. And he planted part of it to grapes, and he harvested the grapes there for a long time, and part of it he planted to popcorn. And then he had the rest of it, he'd put the potatoes and the cabbages and things like that out there on his farm. He was very proud of that farm, and he finally put up a little, what he called his sleeping shack. It was boarded up about so high, and then there were windows from there on up. And in the summertime, when it was so hot down here, he'd always go up there about sunset time, and he'd smoke 1 cigar and watch the sunset, and then he'd go to bed up there. He had a bed up there, and then he'd come down in the morning. But I remember when he'd come in the morning, he'd have what he called his dedour. That was an old rake handle. He had taken the rake off of it, and he put on a lawnmower rollers on it, and he'd go down because the dew would be so heavy that he'd get his feet wet. So he'd run the dedour ahead of him all the way down to where his car was parked down on the road.
Oh, what a lovely story.
I gave that dedour to a cousin of mine who cherishes it.
Oh,
He thinks it's wonderful.
I've never heard of that before.
Well, that was my father's invention.
But I know of the problem walking very far in tall, wet grass.
Well, his cabin was up at the top of the hill, and it was a half a block down, so he saved himself his feet getting so wet.
Did your dad sell any of his produce, or did he give it away, or did the family?
Oh, I think most of the time he sold quite a little bit of his popcorn. He didn't sell very many of the other things. He'd usually either give them away or we were using them there. But he had a special popcorn that doesn't have this little fine film that sticks to your teeth. I've forgotten just now what it was called, but he sold a lot of that for many years. And then the year he died, he died in July. I had to take care of that crop that fall, so I had a number of relatives and friends that came in and helped me harvest that.
How old was it when he passed away? How old was he?
He was, let's see, he was nearly 79.
Oh, he did live a fairly good old age. Did you say, or did I ask you earlier, did he have a business?
Yes, my father was one of the founders of 16th Avenue.
Okay.
He and about 6 of his friends decided to go into business at 16th Avenue, which is now called Czechtown. And I can name the people beginning from the bridge. My father was the grocer, and he was at the corner of C Street and 16th Avenue. And he had a building on the corner that was a tavern that was run by my mother's brother. And then he had his grocery store next door to that. And he was in business for a number of years.
Could you list any of the property owners and their businesses down there?
Oh, yes, I can starting from the 16th Avenue Bridge, the Mr. John, who has what is now a harness shop. Mr. John was the proprietor of that.
Was it a harness shop then?
Well, it was a harness shop, but for horses. It wasn't. It isn't like it is
For
now.
sport, it wasn't
Because
a hobby.
We didn't have automobiles in those days. And then about a few doors from there was Mr. Kuchera, who had a hardware store. And next door to him was Mr. Mujik, who made cigars. Across the street from him was a tavern with Mr. Micka. And halfway down the block toward my father's grocery store was Mr. Victor, who had a dry goods store.
Well, that had been a bustling little community back then.
Well, they finally got some couple of drug stores, and they put in, they got an insurance man. They did, they had 2 meat markets later, another grocery store that came in, and it flourished for many years until my father sold it to the 2 boys, the 2 Vavra brothers, who had been working for my father in the grocery store. And they ran it then for many, many years.
Did they have a bakery?
Well, yes, the bakery came in too later, not when my father went in, but later with the rest of these. There were 2 bakeries, one right close to C Street and one close to A Street. They were competitors, really.
How times have changed.
Oh my! Yes.
When was the last time you was on 16th Avenue?
Just recently, I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I may have been down there for a program at the Czech Museum within the last 3 months, probably. But I can't get down as often as I used to.
Pretty quiet down there now, isn't it?
Yes.
Compared to the way you remembered how
Oh
it
my,
used to
yes.
be. I would imagine that most of the Czech people in the surrounding area probably did their shopping there.
Oh, they probably did all of their shopping.
And they probably found just about everything they needed on
Yes,
16th Avenue.
yes. Because the stores would change eventually. The dry goods store finally handled cooking utensils and things like that too. So I'm sure that the people did most of their shopping down there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the things that took place in during your lifetime. Like you said, there was no automobiles when you were a young girl.
No.
There were horse and buggies in
Yeah,
probably
you were lucky to have a horse to take a horse and buggy.
The more affluent people probably had a horse and buggy
Yeah.
in the.
My father had a horse because he delivered groceries from his store, and on Sundays we always would have the horse and buggy, and we'd go out to a neighborhood picnic out past 23rd Avenue, and the people would all come out there with their horses and buggies, and we'd have an all-day picnic out there.
Did they have a place down on 16th Avenue, what they used to call a livery or a stable, where people would take their horses when
Not
they
on
come to town?
16th Avenue. I think there was over on the southeast side. There probably was one of those, but we never had it over on the west side.
Do you ever remember any runaway horses or anything?
Well, I remember the one I was on. We lived across from Riverside Park, and my father would now and then bring the horse up to the house, and he'd let me get on it, and he'd lead it over to the entrance to the park, and I'd ride it from the entrance of the park. We were just a block from the river, and I'd drive it down to the river, and then pick him back, and my father would be standing there to catch the horse again. But once the horse got frightened, and he, about halfway up from the river, began to run away, and my father was very fortunate that he just grabbed and happened to grab the horse properly. I don't know what might have happened because I was frightened to death, of course. He seemed so tame that I never dreamed that he would try to run away.
Something scared him.
Yes, I suppose so.
And the railroad travel in Cedar Rapids, the Union Station, and some
Oh
of the...
yes, I remember the Union Station blocked Fifth Avenue. It ran from 3rd to 5th Avenue, and it blocked 4th Avenue. You couldn't get through there. And Washington High School was on the east side of 4th Avenue, and I was living on the west side of 4th Avenue, so I had to cross the tracks to get to high school rather than walk up the block to 3rd Avenue and then come back to the high school.
I imagine there was a lot of train traffic in those
Oh
days
my,
through
yes.
downtown.
I rode that train many times, going particularly into Chicago.
Did you?
We had a schedule where we could board the train in the morning and be there all day and then come back in the evening. So it was very convenient for shopping or visiting.
You were commuting years ago. How about trolleys?
Oh, well, we had trolleys. The trolley ran right past my house. It came up from 16th Avenue up to our house, and then it went 2 blocks west, and then went back to town. And the trolley that passed my house there went all the way out to 1st Avenue and out to Kenwood. And when I was in college, it was 2 miles from my house to Combe, and I could have ridden for that distance for 5 cents a trip. And I never thought to take the trolley. I walked.
You walked it.
Even in the wintertime, facing the north wind and crossing the river and out to go college. But I've always contended that walk, plus others that my father used to take us on, and my good check jeans is one of the reasons for my longevity, I think.
I strongly believe that. You were talking about the trolley that run from your house to Coke. Oh, you said it would cost 5 cents back then.
Yes.
Now, could you ride on the same 5 cents to Kenwood, or would it cost you extra to go to Kenwood?
No, that would have been just 5 cents.
5 cents all
Just
the way?
5 cents all the way.
But back then, 5 cents was...
Well, that was a lot of money.
yes, it was. Mhm.
As a matter of fact, the only money that I ever had, really, I didn't ever have a, what do you call it?
Allowance?
An allowance. I never had an allowance.
Yeah.
But on Sunday, my father would each Sunday would give me a nickel, because I used to dig the dandelions out of our yard. He hated the dandelions that used to seed over from the park across us. So I kept the yard clean of dandelions, and he'd give me a dollar every weekend. Then we'd go downtown, about 4 or 5 of us in the neighborhood, trying to decide where to spend our money. And we'd stop at the theater to see what the theater had. You could get in for 5 cents at the theater. And the popcorn shop was right near there, and you could get a package of popcorn for 5 cents or an ice cream cone. So we'd spend a lot of the afternoon trying to decide among us where we were going. And we could either go all together, or if we wanted to, we could separate and go wherever we wanted to.
Was these talking picture shows?
Oh, no, these were all silents. I was a long time after.
Do you remember any of those silent ones that impressed you? Or?
Well, I remember the Charlie Chaplin ones. Yes, that always tickled me. He was such a comedian. I loved him.
Those were better than some of their talking shows today.
Oh my, yes. I see very few movies these days.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a few that isn't. You really wouldn't want to see either. What do you remember about Hunter Airport?
Well, it was the only airport for a long, long time. It was in south of Cedar Rapids, over on the west side, south of my father's farm, actually. We could stand at my father's farm on the top of the hill and watch the airplanes take off. But I remember my father saying once that he thought that he ought to go down and have an airplane ride, because he thought he ought not to have to face St. Peter and tell him that he had never taken an airplane ride. And so Mother and I and he went down. Mother backed down. She wouldn't go. And I guess that influenced me. So I stayed with my mother while my father took a 10-minute ride out along over Cedar Rapids and back. And I think it cost him $5. I'm not sure.
Did you wish, after you'd made that decision, that you would have went with him, or didn't it bother you?
Well, it didn't bother me, but there's...
I had asked you, did you regret after you didn't go, if you wished you would have went with him? Or?
Well, not immediately, though. When I first took my first airplane ride, I was on my way to the West Indies island, and I was terribly frightened because I had never had a ride before.
How old were you?
Oh, I was teaching already by that time.
And you went all the way to the West Indies?
To the West Indies. We landed in Cuba, and then we went to Jamaica, and I don't remember where else we landed.
Do you remember your dad's comments when he come back? If he thought that was grand, or
well, I'm sure
was his mother mad at, or your mother mad at him because he spent that kind of money? Or
well, I was teaching, so I spent my own money that time. But I don't think my father must have been very proud, I'm sure. My mother, I don't think, would have cared much one way or another.
Radios. Did you have a radio when you were a little girl?
No. I remember when my father got his first radio. It was a beautiful walnut cabinet, stood quite high, with a face in it. And that was really something. We spent many hours at the radio after we got that.
The family sat around in the evenings,
yes,
in a circle listening to the radio.
And there were some very fine programs, very different kinds of programs that they're showing today.
Did your father have any favorite programs that he got to listen to first?
Well, I don't remember. He probably sat in there sometimes when Mother and I were in the kitchen. Oh,
Wow.
Hello.
Do you remember any of the programs you used to listen to on the radio?
No, I don't. That's a long time ago, and I don't remember.
Was there Fibber McGee and Molly, or would that have been you'd been too young for that?
I don't remember that.
Yeah. But if you were like my family, we all used to huddle around that radio, and
I think they probably had a newscast, and we would always listen to that. But I don't remember any news.
It was probably operated by battery, wasn't it?
No, I think it was
Electricity?
I think it was plugged into the wall.
Do you think you had electricity at that
think,
time?
Yes.
So up until you had electricity, you didn't have a radio then?
Oh no, this was many, many years after.
How did you find out what was going on in the country, or didn't people really know?
Well, the newspapers were probably the only thing. No, we didn't have any newscasts.
Telephones. Did you, when you were young, when you were a little girl?
Oh,
did you?
we didn't have any. And I remember my cousin, who they lived about 4 blocks from me, where he was always for buying the newest thing. He'd get the newest automobile and everything. He had an automobile when nobody else had one, but he had a telephone put in his home. And I remember being down in their house once when my cousin answered the telephone, and I was just shaking because I was so afraid of what was going to happen when he picked up that receiver. That was the first telephone that I remember.
If
And
he would,
we didn't have them in our house for a long time after that. It was because he was just for always having the newest thing.
if he was alive today, he'd probably have the latest computer and the latest
He'd probably
video cameras.
flying an airplane.
Flying an
I'm sure.
airplane. What was some of your favorite parks in Cedar Rapids, or the big parks you may have went to for picnics? Or
Well, we didn't. We had a park right across the street from us, Riverside Park, which was several blocks long, and it extended into the river, so that we played there, and there were ever so many municipal affairs that went on there. They had a big bandstand, and the band would always play, and then they had concessions, and I think the parks came to me rather than my going. We used to go up to Ellis Park, though, because it was closer to the river than we were, and I don't remember. Well, Beaver, because of the animals, once in a while we'd get over there, but not very often, because that took transportation, and we most of the time walked where we were going.
Do you remember the Alamo?
I remember that the Alamo. I remember about the Alamo, but I don't ever remember. I remember where it was. It was up where the Jefferson School, is it?
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt School, yes. And I remember where it was, but I never went.
did you ever have circuses come to town?
Oh, yes. And they were not. They used to be between 3rd and L Street, I think, on about between 13th and 16th Avenue, southwest, below 9th Avenue, where the railroads used to go. And since it was so close there, that we used to always go to the circuses and the carnivals that came.
Did the circuses come in on the train, I suppose?
Oh yes, they came in on that, and then when they would unload, then all the neighbors would go out there to watch all the animals come off the cars and over to the place where the circuses were to be.
Did they set up a big tent?
Oh yes, a big tent. And the one thing I remember most about that is when they put up the tents, they used to pound the stakes for the ropes to hold on to. Mm-hmm. And I remember the rhythm, the musical rhythm of those hammers going down on the stakes. I remember that. I don't remember anything else much about the circus, because we most of the time couldn't afford to go to the circus, but we'd go to the parade and see all the animals.
I had marked on my list here Carnival Week. That what we'd been talking about was the circuses, or was there another week set aside for Carnival Week in Cedar Rapids?
Well, I think the thing I might have mentioned to you once before is that my father mentioned that the carnivals used to be, when he was young, where St. Paul's Church now is. And he said that was all just open area, and the carnivals used to be out there. And he remembers going to them. I don't remember that.
How about Chautauqua?
Chautauqua. They didn't.
Could you explain Chautauqua to? I think I told you before. I had never heard of this phrase before.
Well, it was centered in the East, I imagine, in New York City, probably, and it was a more or less philanthropical organization that traveled around the country with educated people and groups, and they would stay a week, and they'd have this big tent, and people could come in and enjoy the entertainment. Might be a play, it might be lectures, might be a concert, it could be anything. And I don't remember whether there was a charge to that. Possibly there might have been, but I don't remember. I never attended those, but I've always known it was basically, I think, a philanthropic organization.
Yeah. It wasn't through the school system or...
No, I think it was some organization out of New York or someplace in the East at least.
There used to be, there still is a group with the Czech background, the Sokol.
The Sokols, yes.
Sokol.
Yes.
Was that a club or a
No.
youth organization?
That organization started in Czechoslovakia. It was a gymnastic organization. They felt that if you have a healthy body, you're a better citizen. And they always had a gym, and where people could come and exercise. But it started in Czechoslovakia, and then it came to America, and it spread all throughout the United States as well. I belonged to it, but I never went to the gymnasiums. I never did that.
About Green's Opera House. Did you ever get the occasion to go to Green's Opera House?
Oh my, yes. That wonderful old building that stood up above First Avenue on, let's see, it was 3rd Street, I guess, or 2nd Street, above First Avenue, between 1st and A Avenues. And it was a wonderful, many-tiered building. And I once got to perform there.
Really?
Because Alice Inskeep, who was head of the music program in the Cedar Rapids schools, had put on a play called, I can't think of the name of it, but I remember the thing, and I stood on the stage, and I looked out, and here I saw the dress circle, and then the reserved seats, and then the balconies, and going on up, and oh, it was such a thrill. And I still remember the song. It said, "The time has come," the walrus said, "to speak of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax and cabbages and kings." That was a song that we sang, and I remember it still. But that was in Green's Opera House.
Oh, what a lovely story.
They used to have plays from New York and Chicago come in and perform there too.
Did you ever see the Cherry Sisters perform?
No, I never did.
Yeah.
I knew of them, but I never got to see them.
How old would you have been at that time? Was that something...
I wouldn't have been in high school yet. I would have been a junior, very young.
There was a lot of derogatory comments made about them. Then I've heard comments that people actually thought it was so corny it was funny. So I guess it's just what people's own taste was.
Yes, that's right. I guess they used to live out on 14th Street, was it? 3rd Avenue, Beaver Avenue. That I used to know the house where they used to live, because when we'd go out that way, they'd always point it out to us, of course.
You didn't know them personally?
I didn't know anything about them. I never saw them.
Okay. Marvin Cohen, was he acquaintance of yours?
Oh yes, Marvin was a good friend of mine. He was a member of the faculty when I was there. He was first of all my French teacher, and then when a little later he was put on the faculty, and then I sort of fraternized with him as we had him. I had a group of people up on my father's farm. My father had a big furnace, an iron fireplace from a furnace
Grill, a register.
there, and then we'd cook our wieners and things out there. And Marvin Cohn was out there one night. When he got through eating, he went out and lit his cigarette, and he said, he just came up just like a new man, you know. And I said, gee, I wish that I had something that would do that to me.
Oh. Carl Van Vechten. Vetchen?
Van Vechten.
Van Vechten.
I never knew him. He's been a name in Cedar Rapids many years. He went to New York and made a career there, but I never knew him.
Okay. Life before air conditioning. I know you didn't have air conditioning when you were young.
No, I wonder how we ever stood the temperatures. I suppose if you never have it, you don't miss it. But, and anyway, I was so young that I suspect I wasn't as aware of the heat like I am now.
You probably just thought that was the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
so.
we went barefooted, you know.
Did you ever sleep outside in the summertime?
Oh yes, we'd sleep on the porches if there weren't too many mosquitoes running around. But
Outhouses?
oh yes, we had an outhouse. We had actually a 3-holer,
Oh.
2 for adults and 1 for children.
Oh, you were right up there.
We really were.
Do you remember what year it would have been that you would have had indoor plumbing? Approximately when that would have been?
Well, I would have been probably 16 years old. I remember when we took a part of the kitchen and made a bathroom out of it. And I would have been about 16 years old, I think. I don't know. That would be about 17, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. I can imagine as a teenager, you probably really appreciated that as far as compared to taking a bath in a tub in the living room or on the porch, and then have bathroom and running water and a tub. And
I remember taking baths in an old round tub in the kitchen, but I don't remember much.
Did you get to use clean water, or did you take a bath after everybody else did?
Well, I think maybe I got the first bath rather than the last
You're
one.
very fortunate. You're very fortunate. I was one of 10 kids, and I was always the last.
Oh my! But you still got clean, didn't you?
Yes, yes. Well, with that old-fashioned lye soap, that cleans you up. Holidays. Did any of them stick out in your mind? Memorial Day, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas. 4th of July, was that a big time in your neighborhood?
Well, we'd have neighborhood picnics. The whole south side of, well, the people that probably surrounded 16th Avenue, the merchants were spread in the houses around in there. We used to go up to a farm called, I won't think his name now, but it was up on 23rd Avenue, just beyond 23rd Avenue and J Street. And he would open up the gates and let all the people go in with their horses and buggies. And we'd spend the day there. The men would put up a platform with 10 pins on them, you know, and then they'd suspend the ball from a branch, and then they'd stand and push it, and they'd play that. That was the big game I remember. But we children, we girls would follow the boys around. The boys would go around grounding ground squirrels. They'd find a ground squirrel's hole and pour water in it, and then the ground squirrels would come up or something. I don't remember what, but that's what I remember about those picnics.
And you girls followed the boys around, and the boys probably wished you'd go away. And did the men, did they bring beer to drink?
Oh yes, they always had. I don't know whether it was a bottle or whether it was in a keg. I don't remember.
Did a lot of people make their own beer back then? homebrew?
I
they called
imagine
it?
they did. My father used to make
Did he?
beer. When I was very young, I remember going downstairs and watching the process.
Did he ever make dandelion wine or grape wine?
He tried to make dandelion wine, but I think it didn't prove out too well.
That's
for
why he
him.
didn't like dandelions. And so 4th of July was probably really where all the families got together and it was really celebrated.
Yeah, and then we'd of course shoot off, not fireworks, but we'd shoot off a lot of firecrackers,
Mhm.
but little ones, you
Yeah,
know.
mhm.
They were never very big ones. But in later years, long after we had those picnics, I remember even the neighbors shooting fireworks at night.
Would the cops bother him?
I don't think the cops ever bothered anything.
There probably wasn't enough cops to cover that much of the town.
Well, and I don't think they were that dangerous. They were not the big displays that they have when you go out to see the fireworks.
How about Christmas? Was that a happy time for you as a
yes,
child?
Yes.
What did you get for presents?
Well, I would be lucky if I got. Well, I might have gotten something for my doll if I got some clothes possibly for my doll. We would get an orange or something like that in our stockings, and some candy, of course. But we used to call, I suppose it was Santa Claus, because we had an old heater in our dining room with an isinglass door, if you remember.
Yes.
And my father said you could call up, opened up the door, and he said you can call to Santa Claus and tell him what you want. And so I used to tell him, but I don't remember what I used to tell him.
With some Christmases were probably pretty sparse as far as presents
yes.
were concerned.
It's nothing like what we have today. When you stop to think of the cost of even children's clothes, what they used to get, I think it was just a few handfuls of candy or peanuts or something like that.
Did you have a tree, Christmas tree?
Not until later in life. No, we didn't have a Christmas tree.
What were some of your favorite toys?
Well, I was a doll lover. My uncles used to run one of these, what do you call these wheels that go around to and it stops at a certain number,
Roulette.
and if you had the number.
Paddle wheel or roulette?
Yes, right. My uncles used to run those at bazaars that they had over on the southeast side, and they both happened to be very lucky getting things. And when they got things that they didn't want, they'd give them away to some of the relatives. My uncle brought me, I remember when I must have been quite young, maybe 7 or so, a very large, what do we call the jointed jowl. They were jointed at the wrist and the elbow and the shoulders. And she was so beautiful. And I've kept that doll until just last January, when I sold the furnishings of my house. I finally sold that doll. I had her all those years. And I played with her all the time, and I never broke her.
That would have been something to cherish.
I'd like to know who bought it, but I don't know who bought her.
Did your parents ever go mushrooming?
Oh, yes, we went mushrooming spring and fall. My father was raised in a log cabin, incidentally, down south of Shueyville. And he loved those old clay hills, and he'd take us down over those every spring. We'd go for the morels, then he'd take us down into the woods and we'd gather the berries. Then we'd go for nuts in the fall. We'd get hazelnuts and hickory nuts and walnuts. And then we'd get the fall mushrooms down there too. We were always in the woods and always climbing those hills. I remember the times we tread those paths.
You were an outdoor girl. You loved the
Yes.
outdoors.
My father was, and so he took us always.
Sundays. How did was your parents church-going people?
Really not, because my grandparents were immigrants from Czechoslovakia, and one of the reasons, there were several reasons why they immigrated. First of all, they were under the Austro-Hungarian Empire for 300 years, and Austria was always fighting some nations, and all the boys had to go through military training, and then of course go into the wars. And there were 5 boys in both sides of my grandparents, and I think that was one of the reasons why they came to America. Another one was that they had to be Catholic, and my grandparents didn't want to be Catholic. That was another reason.
In Austria, they had to be Catholic.
Yeah, well, Austria was Catholic, and they tried to make the Czech people become Catholic too. They were well, not really. They were persecuted, really, but they were so uncomfortable that they couldn't enjoy their religion. And then the third thing was that the country was so highly taxed. I remember my mother saying the tax people would come in and they'd say, well, now this much of this field is mine and this much is yours. And those were the prime reasons, I think, that they came to this country.
Very, very interesting story. Back in your younger days, if anybody got sick, I don't suppose you went to the hospital.
Oh, no, we didn't know what a hospital was. No, the doctors used to come, though, to the homes, and our doctor used to be Dr. French, and he was very elderly when we had him, and he used to come in and take care of us, and then he'd sit and he'd open up this little brown bag of his and bring out these bottles of pills that always amazed me. And then when he'd close it, then he'd sit back in a chair and he'd visit for 15 or 20 minutes before he left. I don't know how they happened to have time. And he used to drive a horse and buggy to come to see us, I remember.
I don't think you could get one to slow down that long anymore to talk to you for 15 minutes.
Oh, my goodness, they get you out.
Visit about your family and
Yeah.
different things. Was you born at home, Alma?
Yes, I was.
You were born at home.
Yes.
Was that Dr. French that...
Yes, I suppose so.
How about the Douglas Starch Works?
Oh, we lived about 2.5 blocks away from the Douglas Starch Works, and it used to smell a lot of the time when they were manufacturing. That bothered us. But I do remember the fire the explosion that they had there.
Do you remember where you were or what you were doing when it
I was
exploded?
at home and I was getting ready to go for a dancing lesson. I must have been late high school, I imagine. And I was just ready to go when this awful explosion came, and it blew the front. The only thing that I can remember is that it cracked one of the cellar windows, but it jammed the front door that I was going to go out of, so that we couldn't get it open. But I think we were so close that I imagine the explosion went up and over, and we didn't get as much damage as many of the people in Cedar Rapids got.
What was your dad doing then? Was he around in the neighborhood, or?
I think he was in his filling station. He finally tore down the grocery store that he had on 16th Avenue, and he put a filling station in there. And before he did it, he inquired of all his friends to be sure to see whether he was wise in doing it. And he said he got the one reply he got more often is, "Oh, Charlie, don't you'd be a damn fool if you did." There are already 14 filling stations in Cedar Rapids, and you'd be the 15th. And now we've got filling stations on all four corners of Cedar Rapids.
That's right. The Roaring '20s, Alma. What do you remember about those? You've been what, 19? You've been in your early
I would be
20s?
about 19.
Was you a party girl, or you pretty much
No, I wasn't.
homebody?
I wasn't much of a party girl. I don't remember too much about them. We saw some movies that had the Roaring 20 girls in them, but I don't remember too much about the 20s.
Didn't leave an impression on
No.
you. Well, excuse me. I'm going to leave your childhood life and your teenage life, and let's move on, and you can tell us what you did from college on. You went to college at Cole?
I went to college at Coe. I was very lucky that I got to go. I never dreamed that I'd have a chance to go. My father was modestly wealthy, I mean, enough to take care of us, but it never occurred to me that I'd ever have a chance to get to college. But my father was always interested in education, and he encouraged me to go. He took me up to interview some people there, and I met with Dr. Hickok, who's a well-renowned former professor at Coe. And then I started, but I didn't go immediately from high school because my sister had passed away, and my mother went to pieces about it, and she objected to my going to school, so I stayed out a year. But then a year afterward, I started at Coe.
Okay. I wanted to ask you earlier. How old was your sister when she passed away?
She was about 26.
26, and she died, you said, during the one of the.
Yeah, her husband went to the First World War, and when he came back, they were married. So that would have been, I don't know whether he came back about 1918 or somewhere.
What illness did she contract?
She was first of all pregnant, and then she got double pneumonia and the influenza. That was when we were having that awful siege, the epidemic that was going around. I remember we were up at Dr. French's office downtown getting influenza shots when the armistice was declared, and we heard all of this racket out of the windows, all the people celebrating, and we were getting shots for influenza up there that morning.
Was this something that affected the Cedar Rapids area, or was it larger than that?
Oh, that was the. Have you never heard of the celebration? No, that was.
I meant the influenza.
That was countrywide.
Countrywide.
Yeah, the people were dying by ever so fast all throughout the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's go back to Cole College then.
Well, I went to Coe, and then when I was a sophomore, I had made such good grades in music theory, which was harmony then. And Louise Crawford, who was the daughter of Dr. Crawford, who was then a doctor in Cedar Rapids, had all of the music theory courses. Now that meant 2 courses in music of harmony, a course in history, a course in form, a course in harmonic analysis, and counterpoint. That was 6 classes that she was teaching. And she felt that she needed some assistance. And I had made such good grades in freshman theory that she asked if I could be appointed as her assistant. And I corrected all the freshman papers. And then, of course, as I went on through senior years, I corrected the papers, all except the class that I was in. And she was so impressed with my ability that she petitioned the faculty to have me be put on the faculty so that I could continue to correct her papers as I was on the faculty. And I was appointed in 1925, the year that I graduated. And I worked with her until she retired. And then I took over all of the work that she had, except 1 class in harmony, and I didn't have the history. But I had all the other courses until I retired.
In order for you to go to college, was he able to pay for your tuition, or did you have to get a part-time job to help?
No, fortunately my father managed to pay the tuition, but of course tuition was not what it is today. I came across some papers not too long ago where I found one of the payments that he had made was $242 for, I think it was a year's tuition. Well, compare that with today.
What are some of the really enjoyable times that you remembered throughout your career? Any particular standout that people you may have had the association or had the pleasure of associating with, or events?
Well, a lot of my life, because I was teaching 4 of those courses at this Crawford life, kept me pretty busy at the college. And I taught 6 days a week. I had a church choir on the 7th. But my associations were largely through the college, the faculty, and the occasions that were on the campus.
Did you actually teach a lot of students?
Oh, yes.
Did any of them go on to become famous that you know of in the music world?
Conger Metcalf, who painted these pictures, was in my classes. And he went to Boston and but he took a music degree from Coe.
Really?
But he was working with art in the art department at the same time. And I think he was wiser to choose art as a career than he would have had music. Music would have been harder for him to get into. He was talented, but not that much talented that he would have had an easy way to get into music.
The students that took music, I assume they took music because they were very serious about music.
Yes.
It isn't something they would frivolously have signed up for.
Yes. Most of them came in to be public school music teachers. And I didn't teach those courses, but they had to have the music theory in order to do the other things. And yes, a lot of those went out and became fine teachers. I used to be wasn't too surprised to find that my former students would bring back their children, and then it got so that they would come back and the graduations of their children, and then finally when the retirements of my former students came along, I began to realize that I was getting awfully old. But a lot of those students went from music into business concerns, or they married or something like that. So there were some people, I can't offhand think of any great names, but there were lots of them. I have a former student now that's a head of a concern in Chicago. I can't name it for you this minute, but
That's okay.
there are many of them that became great. Some of my students became ministers and went out.
That had to mean a great deal to you
Yeah.
when they made a success with themselves later in
Yeah.
life. How old were you when you left to go, when you retired?
I was 60. I retired in '69, so I must have been 68 years
68. You were still a young lady, so what did you do after you retired? Did you travel or take up some other type of...
old. I traveled mostly. I went to, I can't think where it was, but when I retired, because I thought if I could get away, it was out off of New York, one of the islands off of New York.
Manhattan?
No, I can't think of what the island is just this minute. But I went there to get so that I wouldn't mind the ending of my career.
Yeah.
And then I...
Did it help?
Oh yes, because we rented a cottage and we were on the ocean side, you see. And I forgot about it. I knew that I'd be lonesome not going back. But...
For years after, when the school year would start in the fall of the year, did you get kind of a twinge? Or,
well, you finally get used to it, and you're kind of glad that you don't have all that push and the trouble and everything that you had. I enjoyed my teaching, no end, and I have wonderful students that still keep in touch with me, Christmas and birthdays. But I was always glad just not to have that flood of campus mail that came into my mailbox every morning. And then the rush of exams and getting your grades in under a deadline, and I never got it really after that.
maybe now it would be all done on a computer.
Oh,
And you'd
yes,
have to answer all your email instead of
that's
your...
right. And I'm saying I'm too old and I don't want to take the time to learn a computer. I think I could still learn a
I'm
computer.
sure you could.
But I just don't want
Yeah.
to.
Did you take any tours, or did you travel to other
Yes.
countries? No.
I've done ever so many tours. Mostly, not mostly, but part of the time with a friend of mine, Edna Mae Sela, who is a very close friend. We graduated.
Is that
No, not this one. But we graduated together from Cohen. We used to sit on campus and say, well, now, do you suppose we'll ever be able to buy a grand piano? And do you think we'll ever be able to travel? And we were always wishing and sighing. And then once I called her and I said, I want to, well, before that I decided I wanted to go to New York to study. So I went to New York to study with Madame Samarov, who was then in the big school, the big music school in New York City. And I had a leave of absence that year. And then in 1928, I had a chance to accept a German-American scholarship. And I asked, school was ready to begin. And I asked for a leave of absence, and they said, well, if we can find a substitute for you to go, it'll be all right. And we found a former student of mine to come back and teach the year that I was there. And I went to Berlin, and I studied there for a year. Well, a year except the summer. In the summer I traveled in Europe. And I studied in the Stern Conservatory. And
Did you speak German?
no, I learned ja and nein on the boat going over. And then I learned to say thank you for everything, you know.
Danke.
And then when I got to Berlin, I carried a English, German, English dictionary. in my purse all the time. And then if I wanted a question, I'd point to a word, and it's amazing how you can speak when you don't know the language. Facial expressions and body English and everything makes all the difference in the world, and I found my way around without any trouble at all.
Did you ever get the chance to travel back to Czechoslovakia?
Oh yes, I went back several times, but the first time that was the year I went to Germany. I went by boat because there were no airplanes flying then, of course. But I went from Germany down to Czechoslovakia, and I went to visit the villages of my parents. I went first to my mother's family, and I had to take a train and we got off, and there was a priest that was getting off at the same time with me. And he said we had about a half a mile to walk to the village because the train didn't go into the village. And so I walked with him, and he invited me to, it was nearly noontime then, and he had invited me to have lunch with him. So I ate lunch with him, and then he brought, I was telling him about my parents, and he went into the vault, my mother's side, and he brought back this great big ledger that must have been years old and I found the names of the baptism of my whole mother's family. I took it all down, and then from there, well, I guess that's all about that one. But then later I went to my father's village, and I found so many Turecheks that they weren't sure which Turechek it would be.
Oh.
But I ran into an 85-year-old man that remembered my grandparents apparently, or somebody from it, and he took me to the house where he remembered that my grandparents had lived. That was my mother's side. I bought him a beer, and we sat and we visited for a long, long time about things that happened there.
This is I assume, is a picture of your father.
Yes, this is my
Would you like
father.
Can you get that?
I got it.
Does he have a mustache there?
Yes, he does.
Well,
What was his first name again?
Charles.
Charles Turechek.
Charles Turechek. He didn't always wear his mustache, but my mother didn't like it too well, so he eventually cut it off.
And that picture there,
This is my friend Virginia Chase from Rochester, New York. When I went to New York to study, she happened to come and live in the same dormitory that I was living in. It was you had to be in the arts studying in New York to live there. And that was in 1928. And we became such close friends that we found that we wanted to explore New York. So after we'd eat, we would go out and see a church, or we would explore a certain area of the city, so that when we left there, we knew New York like New Yorkers usually don't know it.
what a terrific experience to be able to.
Well, it's wonderful that we kept friends all of these years. One summer she would come here, and the next summer I'd go there. And all of these years since 1928, she sent me this for my 99th birthday.
Well, speaking of your 99th birthday, Alma, if you had to do it all over again, would you have done anything different, or would you have wished anything could have been different in your life?
Oh, I suspect we all wished we might have some difference. I don't know. I don't think I ever planned my life ahead, because I never knew what was that I could plan it. maybe now, if I had it over, I would plan it probably a little differently.
Was there any things that you wished you would have pursued, but at the time you thought it might not have been wise to do it?
No, I've been very happy in my music and my teaching. It's been very profitable, and I cherish the friendships that all these students have kept with me all of these years. I never made $1 million. You don't make it doing
Teaching.
what I did and staying in a locale like Cedar Rapids. But I'm not even sure that College even appreciated me because I was local talent.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been happy. I've had a happy life.
Very satisfying life.
Very satisfying. When I go to bed at night and I don't sleep, I have wonderful memories.
After 99 and a half years, and if you can say that, and whatever you accomplished in your life that you were very satisfied with, I think that's what it's all about. Isn't how much money you make or how many toys you got laying around. And unless you have something else to say, Alma, I'd like to bring this a close. In the History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for giving us this amount of time you're giving and sharing us your memories.
Well, you're very welcome. I've enjoyed it too.
Thank you.
You've been very kind to talk to me.
Thank you.